This podcast is focused on the week's news in US foreign policy and its impact on key issues in the Middle East, including diplomacy, security, and economic relations in the region. We analyze and provide context for those unfamiliar with the issues, and we aim to bridge gaps in understanding. Greetings, this is your host, Nizar, and you're listening to Bridging East and West with Nizar. In this episode, we discuss the first debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris with a special focus on foreign policy and how their economic visions could affect America's global standing. Let's jump into it. The debate focused primarily on domestic issues. However, some of these issues influence foreign policy. More importantly, foreign policy will be very different depending on who ends up being president. Therefore, it is still useful to go over a few of these domestic issues to assess who has a better chance of winning and how they could do that. As expected, Harris spoke of government support for struggling families while criticizing the Republicans' favoring of ultra-rich.
I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit.
Trump focused on criticizing the Democrats' record on the economy and contrasting it with his own.
Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class.
But the reality is that the average American citizen is less concerned about the long-term impact of trade and policies that affect the economy and more focused on short-term and immediate improvement of their situation. A struggling family would rather get a few cents now than more dollars later, and Trump was counting on that. Kamala focused on Project 2025 while showing how she's offering what she called an opportunity economy that works for everyone.
And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America.
Trump distanced himself from this Project 2025 because he knows that it is very unpopular. But I think most people believe that his agenda is mostly from that Project 2025, if not all of it. So I'm not sure that he convinced anyone.
You know, and she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do.
Another topic was abortion. This is probably the topic where Harris clearly outperformed Trump. She used examples of what pregnant women's lives would be like under his presidency.
Over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that.
And Trump, on the other hand, resorted to repulsive imagery, which I think did not work with the audience.
They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before. He said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me.
Now, on immigration and border security, both argued about each administration's record and that they did a better job.
Would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
However, if we go into specifics, we see the following. Harris mentioned the January 6th riot and how 100 law enforcement officials were injured and some died. So she's emphasizing how lawless it was.
Elect, I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation.
And Trump spoke about the immigrants going into American communities and eating dogs and pets.
The United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
Now, many people thought this was ridiculous. However, I think, in fact, that was a dog whistle. He was referencing or evoking the image of, or the stereotype that Asians eat dogs, and making the audience, the listener, fear that those immigrants are coming and they're going to change America and make it a society that eats dogs. So the whole idea is to evoke fear and repulsion from the audience, from the listeners. Harris also invited the audience to imagine what a Trump presidency would be like when he has the immunity from criminal prosecution, which is what the Supreme Court said or spoke about when the issue was raised with it. So she's emphasizing how Trump is trying to be above the law. Now, as far as the weaponization of the justice system, both Trump and Harris claimed that the other was weaponizing it. So I don't think that it had much impact on the listeners. Most noteworthy, I would say, is how Harris endorsed fracking clearly And on gun violence, she said that she and Waltz are gun owners. Her being so explicitly not on the left on this issue shows how far she is willing to go in order to lure those voters from the center and who are anti-Trump Republicans, even if that's at the expense of people from the left. So that's clearly an indication of what strategy she's going for.
I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
Now, as far as the war in Gaza, or the genocide, in fact, this was really interesting to see the different elements that they each tried to focus on, because even if it was a short section of the whole debate, I think there were a lot of interesting points raised. Harris, of course, mentioned that the requisite framing that it was Hamas's fault and Hamas is a terrorist organization and that it started it. But at the same time, she said there are too many innocent Palestinians who were killed and that the war must end and the ceasefire must happen. So she's trying to balance while, of course, prioritizing Israel's security. What is, I think, interesting here is that she did use the language of security for Israel and Palestinians in equal measure, right? So this is the first time, actually not the first time, I think Biden said the same, where finally the Palestinians are on the same level as Israelis, which I think is important, but not enough for the pro-Palestine faction in the Democratic Party. I think it's a step in the right direction, but it's not enough. From the point of view of Republicans who don't like Trump or the undecided, her saying that Israel and the Israelis and Palestinians deserve security in equal measure makes her come across as somebody who's measured, who's rational, and therefore she's much more convincing as a president who can do something positive on this issue more than Trump, because Trump is famous for being a bit erratic and unpredictable. Of course, Harris was again very clear about standing with Israel's right to defend itself by itself, and that the United States would make sure that Israel has the defense necessary to counter any Iranian attack. So that was also very important for her to make clear. Because, of course, on the other hand, Trump would say that he was the one who stopped the Iran deal, and that makes him somebody who's a better friend of Israel, or somebody who protected Israel from Iran effectively. Harris also mentioned that we have to work towards the two-state solution because that's the only game in town as far as Washington is concerned. She's not going to talk about the one state, of course.
A terrorist organization slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump said that if he were president, the war wouldn't have started to begin with, right? So he's trying to show how in foreign policy, he's a person who the way he engages in foreign policy is with a lot of firmness, that the other actors react to him and respond to his firmness, while the Democrats are undecided and unclear in their policy, and that makes our adversaries encouraged to for Putin to attack Ukraine and for Hamas to attack Israel. So that's the main image that he wants to portray the Democrats as, and I think he succeeds with a lot of Americans in agreeing with him that that's a problem with the Democrats that they don't have with Trump. Interestingly, Trump claimed that Harris hates Israel and hates the Arabs, which again I thought was a very ill-advised approach. I don't think anybody took it seriously. But more provocatively, he said that if she is president, Israel would cease to exist in 2 years.
Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had.
Again, this is more about the imagery and not the reality or the rationale that it's logical, because by saying that, he's evoking the fear of the pro-Israel crowd. Just the image of Israel not existing in 2 years would result in a knee-jerk reaction. Oh my God, no, we have to vote for Trump. The Dems are bad. So again, he's harping on emotional triggers. An interesting one from Harris was how she said that Trump admires dictators, and that so many military leaders told her that they think Trump is a disgrace in how he panders to dictators. Of course, that was her way of getting under Trump's skin.
Distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself.
She goes further and shows how he tries to. She argues that the foreign leaders know this about Trump and know that he likes dictators, but also likes flattery. So again, she provokes Trump by saying that foreign leaders know that by flattering him, they can manipulate him. And it was clear that Trump was very annoyed by that. And he was off his game when he said, well, Putin endorsed Harris because he got away with so much. Again, it wasn't a persuasive counter argument. And I think Harris had rehearsed how to provoke Trump and make him look like somebody who took a blow and got off his game. Because again, from the perspective of like debates, the point is less about the rational policy points and more about who's the strong person, who's the person that even if they get a blow are still standing. It's about convincing the audience that this person is the right person who has the temperament and the strength for the job. In general, what we see was that she came across as very polished, that she had rehearsed, while Trump was a natural. But in this case, unlike Hillary Clinton in 2016, it actually worked to her advantage that she was prepared and she delivered her points in a very strong way, right? So it did make her look like somebody who's strong. And we have to remember that people know Trump. They have experienced him as a president for 4 years, while they know very little about Kamala Harris. So I think she did it by appearing as prepared. She was good in giving the image that she is a strong leader. She focused that on Trump being a divisive figure, that he polarizes Americans, while what she said, of course, is what we need is to come together, and what all of us believes, right? She's trying to bring herself with the rest of the Americans, that what brings us together is more than what divides us. Again, portraying him as the problem and her being the real American, what stands for what Americans care about more. Trump also she managed to keep Trump focused on grievances while she was focused on rallying the Americans to, build the future and how they can go forward, right? So, making the image that Trump is taking things backwards while she is moving forwards. But I think more importantly, the image of him being a whiner, right? Like he's only complaining, complaining, complaining all the time, while she's the responsible adult who has a steady hand and knows how to manage a whiner. So again, helping the undecided voters get a sense that of the two of them, Harris is the stable one. Harris is the one that's probably not going to do any rash decisions, while Trump is unpredictable. Yes, he might have helped the economy back when he was president, but again, you can't bet on him because he can do all sorts of surprising things. And I think that is a very important point that favors Harris. Now, it's unclear whether there will be another debate, but my guess is that Trump will want a rematch because he knows that he didn't perform well. That is all for this episode. I hope you found our analysis rich and insightful. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe, and do share your thoughts as we love learning from you guys. Thank you for joining us as we bridge East and West.